All the reliable intel out there paints a pretty one-sided picture.
I mean, Russia is reopening its spy base in Cuba.
A Russian missile,
just the one that's 150 miles off the Florida coast,
fired from a Russian system.
Responsibility lays at the feet of President Putin.
In an area controlled by pro-Russian separatists.
Vladimir Putin had been in Cuba meeting with Raul Castro.
Not just for this, but for every incident.
Who've received arms and weapons training from Russia.
Responsibility lays at the feet of President Putin.
Of Vladimir Putin, formerly of the KGB.
For every incident that we have seen throughout this conflict. Period.
We all know that the separatists are Russians. And the Russians are separatists.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass death.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it, and that's just a fact.
It's hard to imagine the media getting a story wrong to the extent they have done so with Ukraine. They have portrayed events there as being almost the exact opposite of reality.
This is the way one contributor on MSNBC described the current regime in Kiev.
The democratically elected, internationally recognized government of Kiev.
In fact, it is anything but that. The elected government of Ukraine was overthrown in February of 2014 in a coup sponsored by the United States.
The elected president was removed after we had major street violence. There were pictures that people running around with these that we were told were neo-Nazis.
First of all, the vast majority of those who participated on the Maidan were peaceful protesters. If you had a chance to see the pictures, many of us visited, including many members here.
Right before you go on, I saw those pictures as well. I also saw a lot of pictures of people throwing firebombs at groups of policemen who were huddled over in a corner, where people shooting into the ranks of police. So yes, there were mothers with flowers, but there were also very dangerous street fighters who were engaged in those demonstrations. The question is, were there neo-Nazi groups involved in that?
There were, as I said, almost every color of Ukraine was represented, including some ugly colors.
The answer is yes, then.
Victoria Nuland knew very well that there were Nazis at the Maidan demonstrations. A private telephone conversation between her and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine was posted on the internet in early February of 2014. In it she makes reference to someone named Tony Bork, a leading neo-Nazi in Ukraine.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now, so we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yacht.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it.
As plain and obvious as that conversation makes it, MSNBC not only hides the U.S. role in the deadly coup, but actually appears to be orchestrating a cover-up for the administration. Listen to this. Absolutely insane.
Yanukovych to flee. I want to be clear, I was still in the government at the time. That is not the administration's view, and that was not my view at the time watching it. I think it's still rather mysterious why Yanukovych fled.
Mysterious? Really? Well, I'll say.
It's incredible to me that they would let him say that, when the truth is so obvious. In fact, there's even video of Nuland at the Maidan, feeding The demonstrators.
Some bread for you? Get some bread. You're hungry. Come on. All right, and for your guys on the
trade relations, all of these other things that you have to do if another country comes into existence, and it would be just like what happened in Georgia. But instead, if Russia just takes Crimea into its own territory, takes Crimea into the existing nation of Russia, then Russia does something that is arguably even more inflammatory to the international community, just unilaterally annexing new territory. But
Crimea is traditionally part of Russia. Its inhabitants, for centuries, have considered it so. The border that links it to Ukraine is a remnant of the later Soviet years.
Making here, this referendum, I think everybody knew there was going to be some sort of referendum staged in Crimea in terms of how to try to normalize the Russian invasion. Did you know, or should we have expected that it would be to annex them into the Russian Federation?
The Russian invasion you heard about. It didn't happen. In fact, Crimea was not administered as part of Ukraine, but rather under a treaty with Russia. It is home to Russia's largest naval fleet, so saying Russia launched an invasion is a lot like saying the U.S. Army invaded its own base in California.
News coverage like this is absolutely shameful.
That's not the map. There's the other map. One more that shows the countries divide. So the red area, pretty much along the line that I drew, are the part of the country that is pro-Russia, that is sympathetic to Russia, that is voted for pro-Russian candidates. So if Crimea, the little piece on the bottom, becomes annexed, what happens to the rest?
Yeah.
Already there have been noises coming out of the foreign ministry, certainly in the Russian media, that the Russian-speaking and the Russian-sympathetic populations in this green belt are in danger, that they are being harassed, that they're being attacked, that they're being threatened by the yellow part, by the Ukrainian nationals.
Is that propaganda, or is there evidence that they're...
I think a lot of it's propaganda.
Yeah.
There are fascists and extremists, and there are certain people in Ukraine who don't want to see that, Crimea or other parts of the country go away. But I think
now? Well, the corporate media will keep on telling you that the Russians are behind this war. They are not. War is the last thing they wanted.
So where is all this leading? The role the mass media plays in fanning the flames of war is not fully appreciated. It is huge.
You simply can't get people behind a real war without a publicly recognized and hated enemy.
The media is extremely powerful when people are complacent. But when people start to question what they hear, it's different. We can push back. Let them know we aren't as stupid as they think. And turn off MSNBC and its ilk. Falling ratings hits them where it hurts.
3 adjectives you'd use to describe Vladimir Putin?
I think thuggish, dishonest. I think I'd say reckless too.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev has been, quote, knocking down conspiracy theories, really, that have been running on Russian state television. Russian state TV all day has been running accusations that it was the Ukrainian military that shot down the Malaysian jet.
This is the nonsense you get when you get your main source of news from Moscow television, an instrument of Vladimir Putin, someone who was reared in the Soviet communist mindset.
I don't think you have any conception of the danger of the Communist Party.
Turns out, though, that communism in practice is a pretty terrible way to run countries. Send your hate mail to Rachel at MSNBC.com.
Vladimir Putin is a KGB colonel that is an international pariah, in my view, and should be treated as such.
After he stole Crimea from the sovereign state of Ukraine.
It feels like it is turning on a slightly different axis when it comes to Russia right now. The whole world is turning against Russia and against Vladimir Putin.
How do you solve a problem like Putin?
The Russians have launched an incredibly effective propaganda war. We should be engaged in that as well.